Coming up next on Nevada Week in Review, Senator Dean Heller and Congresswoman Shelley Berkley go head-to-head in the first of 3 debates. Despite a stagnant economy, Governor Brian Sandoval is way more popular in Nevada than Governor Mitt Romney. And President Obama decides to prep for his debate in Henderson. All that and more coming up next on Nevada Week in Review. Welcome to Nevada Week in Review. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce the media panel. Kevin Bolinger is an anchor reporter with Fox 5 News. Patrick Cooligan is a columnist with the Las Vegas Sun. Steve Sebelius is a columnist with the Las Vegas Review-Journal. And Elizabeth Crum is host of The Agenda on News 3. All right, let's start with the debate. Was there a clear winner or a clear loser? Kevin.
I don't think that anybody came out as a clear winner. It was pretty much as scripted. I think everybody hit the talking points and they wanted to, and there was no big swing, I guess, if you could there. I guess the big question for voters to figure out is how do they perceive the candidates, and if they came out more polished, do they consider them a more polished politician, or is it because that they were in line with their facts, and if they were frazzled? I mean, how do people take away from that? I mean, we won't really know until we see the poll numbers come out.
Is it possible that one of them could have been perceived as more polished, and that could be a disadvantage?
Dean Heller was clearly more polished, at least in my eyes. It seemed at times that Shelley Berkley was a little more frazzled. I don't know what the word maybe is. And then that's where the perspective of the voter, the undecided voter, comes in. Do they see a polished debate person as a politician? You know, and obviously there's some negativity around that term right now. Or do they like to see that? And that's the question.
I think it's sort of a sad commentary on the debate that we're relegated to talking about who seemed the most polished. This is how the voters are going to make up their minds in the U.S. Senate, you know, one of the most powerful deliberative bodies on the planet. You know, there wasn't a lot of substance. I was very disappointed in both of these candidates when it came to an intelligent discourse on policy. I guess I wasn't holding out a lot of hope, but I had a little bit of hope that we might hear that from one of them. But it was just the same old tired talking points that we've been hearing. All of us have been hearing for months. There was nothing new. To me, it's just all meaningless rhetoric at this point. And I don't know how the voters hope to figure out which candidate they want to vote for.
Well, the race is essentially tied, neck and neck. So both of them are afraid of making a mistake. And so consequently, exactly as he says, it's, you know, ask the question, get the answer that you've gotten 20 times before. Nothing new. Certainly no sign that either of the candidates, you know, have really grappled with the implications of the policies that they're talking about. And nothing for a voter to really grasp onto to say, yeah, you know, I like this person over that person because they gave a more intelligent answer on a particular question. So it was kind of disappointing. I think I agree, and there's no, to answer your question, there's no clear winner or loser.
I was particularly disappointed in Congresswoman Berkley. President Obama is leading the presidential race, I think, because he's made the case that he inherited a terrible situation, made some difficult choices to stabilize the banking system, to save Detroit, the auto industry, and to do the stimulus, which has been unpopular, but the public has basically said, we don't think it's your fault, you've done what you had to do, probably going to give you another 4 years. She didn't make that case at all. She allowed Heller to attack her on saving Detroit. She should have turned that around and said, we saved the auto industry. Those auto workers who would have been out of work are now in work. And where do you think they vacation? They do so in Las Vegas. She also made a couple strange statements. Of course, she supported doing away with the inheritance tax, which is just a terrible idea. It's a massive tax cut for the wealthy. And she bragged about it. In this time when we're talking about Mitt Romney's 47% and the 1% versus the 99%, here she is bragging about how she got together with Republicans to redistribute the wealth upward yet again. Then she said she supported the balanced budget amendment, which is terrible policy to begin with, but she said she won't do it on the backs of the senior citizens. and veterans. Okay, well, first of all, that's absolute nonsense because you cannot balance the budget without significant cuts in healthcare costs, i.e. Medicare. But if you're not going to touch the seniors or veterans, okay, you're going to do it on the backs of the poor and children. So I just was very disappointed in her performance.
I want to echo something Patrick said. I did find it interesting. I was very curious to see whether she would continue to either distance herself from President Obama or not mention him at all. She did a little bit of both, because the one time she did mention him, it was to say that she had called him up to sternly speak to him about his policy in regard to Israel. But other than that, yeah, she doesn't seem to be taking advantage, I think, of what is a general perception in Nevada right now, which is that President Obama is leading here, I think, by probably 5 to 7 points. Possibly even more, because I think some of these surveys might be faulty, and I'm not sure I understand why she feels she needs to do that, and why she was bringing up some conservative talking points last night, which I guess would be a play towards that side of the aisle. But I don't know that she really needs to do that politically.
Yeah, how about the Keystone XL pipeline? She came out in favor of the Keystone XL pipeline, which is something that the president has not been in favor of. And Republicans have consistently criticized him on. And now Shelley Berkley, announces maybe that was the one bit of news there that we wrung out of her, was the Keystone Pipeline. I'd never heard that she was in favor of that before, and the Balanced Budget Amendment too. That was something that I'd never heard Shelley Berkley embrace up until now.
Did you notice that did Senator Heller pivot at all during the debate? Because typically, for a general election race, you want to tack towards the center. It's sort of expected of candidates. You said that Congresswoman Berkley did that. Did you notice that of Senator Heller at all?
Well, he tried. He talked. He kept mentioning the middle class. I think he tried to sound moderate whenever he talked about bipartisanship and working together, both with his colleagues and and in general in Congress. But it was less specific, I think, than some of Berkeley's gives to the other side. It seemed a little bit more vague to me.
And Berkeley may have been trying to make some inroads in northern Nevada, obviously, where it's maybe not in Washoe County, but in some of the rural parts in Douglas County, which are heavily Republican. But maybe she was trying to make some inroads there because the numbers up there have not been as strong. So maybe that was a chance to maybe turn the tide a little bit and get some new direction for how she's going to focus up there in the last 30 days.
Well, here's a hint to Shelley Berkley. She's not going to win Douglas County. Her victory is going to happen down here in southern Nevada. And maybe she spent too much time in Washington, because the southern part of the state has changed significantly, and working class people down here who've struggled the last few years, they're not looking for inheritance tax cuts or the Bush tax cuts that she supported during the previous decade. They're looking for the kind of populist opportunity rhetoric that we hear out of Obama.
I heard she was
Heller did pivot, though. He did pivot from an accurate characterization of what he said to a false characterization of what he said, specifically with his infamous hobos comment. I know he does not like to be reminded of the hobos comment, but he in fact did say that. He questioned whether or not the government unemployment insurance and people on that for a long period of time are creating hobos. The question was put to him, are you calling unemployed people in Nevada hobos? He said, no, I did not say that. But if you look at that quote, he did say that. Not only that, the Department of Education, getting rid of the Department of Education, he says now he didn't say that. But a Pahrump newspaper quotes him as saying that. He said, well, no, they corrected that. Oh, no, not really. I read the clarification, and the clarification literally reads, Dean Heller says he didn't say that, leaving the clear implication that the newspaper believes he said exactly that. And you read the original article, and certainly the context is there. He said exactly those things.
A couple quick points. I believe that he did at one point say that he wouldn't mind seeing the Department of Education go away. That was all the rage in 2010 among conservatives. Lots of candidates
I'm surprised he's running away from it.
All over the place. I'm not sure it was so controversial that he needed to do any kind of clarification or correction. On the hobo thing, I've repeatedly read the accounts of what was said, and I don't. My take is just a little bit different than Steve's. I think he was just trying to say that it's possible this could happen. If we extend unemployment benefits, which, by the way, is the debate I would have really liked to hear. Should we continue to indefinitely extend unemployment benefits, and where does it stop? But if we continue to do this, are we going to end up with a population who becomes unskilled after a few years and can't find jobs, and so we do have a return to those sort of Great Depression days. To say that he was directly calling unemployed people hobos, I think is a step too far.
But I think that would be a great question to put to Dean Heller, because notwithstanding his fear of creating a generation of hobos, he voted to extend unemployment benefits. So that'd be a great question for him now. It's like, well, you were worried we're creating hobos, but yet you voted to extend it. Do we have a hobo population increase?
I'll write that down for the next debate.
I would like to, I think we should credit Dean Heller for re-injecting the word hobo into the American conversation.
As much as he hates it, it will never, Heller and hobo are now inexorably linked.
What about on the, one last question, on the immigration issue? I had heard that she came across as pretty impassioned and quite articulate on that particular one. How did that one do amongst the candidates?
Well, Heller he really suffered on that question because he seemed to imply, well, I would be glad to have the DREAM Act come forward if only we could have some amendments to it. Specifically, the amendment that would get rid of the DREAM Act. Republicans do not support that as a policy. They don't support it as a policy. So for him to say or imply that there was any chance of this thing passing, I think is completely disingenuous. And Democrats do support that as a policy. This is one of the reasons that the Republicans have not been able to make any inroads in the Hispanic community.
He actually signed on to a bill in the House to get rid of birthright citizenship. I mean, he is way on the wrong side of this issue as far as Latinos are concerned.
Although he has not used the phrase anchor baby or illegal alien recently, although that
anchor hobo?
Anchor hobo, perhaps. Although he has used those phrases in his career. He no longer uses those because I think he sees the reality of where the demographics are going.
All right, let's move on to a person that does have some popularity in the state of Nevada. That's Governor Sandoval, and I really wanted to talk a little bit about that vis-a-vis Governor Mitt Romney, who doesn't quite have the popularity ratings that Governor Sandoval does, despite the fact that the economy still stinks in the state of Nevada. I guess this RJ poll put the Governor Sandoval at 62% strongly or somewhat approve of his job performance. Is it people who just have a personal liking for the governor and they don't have that for the former governor of Massachusetts?
Well, Sandoval lives here. Mitt Romney does not live here, and so.
But he needs Nevada more than Sandoval does these days.
I don't know that he doesn't live here. I mean,
yeah, he
one
probably
of his
has
houses
a house here.
could be,
at least an elevator.
could be there, but.
I think the people like optimism, and he's Mr. Optimism. And every time you hear him speak, he's always talking about how things are getting better and we're working together, and he's got this economic development team, and he's very pragmatic, actually. Every time a controversial issue comes up, for example, Medicaid expansion, he says neither yay nor nay.
Takes no issue, very pragmatic.
We'll have to see how things look. And I actually think with all of the hyped up rhetoric on both sides in politics, especially in an election year, and that a lot of that rhetoric is negative, that, Governor Sandoval is like a breath of fresh air whenever he speaks.
I think he is onto something here, because look at Romney. Romney is always a downer. He thinks the economy is so bad, things are so terrible, Obama has destroyed America. He's such a downer, but Sandoval is very sunny and very optimistic. Maybe that explains the poll results.
He took office at the perfect time. It was the absolute trough when he got elected. Things have slowly improved, so it was really the perfect time to get elected because things have definitely improved. You look at the retail sales and the visitation numbers and all that, they keep improving. The other thing is, I think he just compares so well to his predecessor. The public had grown to really revile Jim Gibbons by the time he left. His tenure was so exhausting, I think, for the public.
There's a relief factor.
Yeah, there's a total relief. Like at least the governor is not on my front page, with the podiatrist's wife and so forth. And I think that was so in some ways I would say he's been lucky, but he also is he's a pretty skilled guy.
And he's been out of the spotlight, as you talked about, and the focus has been on all the presidential stuff. I would like to see the first poll after the legislative session, or maybe during the legislative session, and see kind of what people's thoughts are there. Even though, he did at the end of the session kind of make some moves that I think maybe a lot of the more moderate people liked that he did to try and get the balanced budget. And now we'll see what happens here in his next session, because this is the one that's going to be the re-election session for him. So How aggressive is he going to be, or is he going to kind of sit back a little bit so he has somebody to pawn it off on over there with the Assembly and the Senate? And I think that those are the numbers that I really want to see. Maybe a right before the session, the middle of the session, and then at the end of the session.
Well, this is interesting. When the 47% comment, the infamous 47% comment surfaced on that iPhone, or whoever took that, of Governor Romney, Governor Sandoval said, quote, "I don't agree with it." I mean, he came right out, and it appears as though he hasn't made that many public appearances with Governor Mitt Romney. Now, there's probably legitimate conflicts or whatever, but
Well, he's disappointed that Rick Perry didn't get the nomination. Remember, that was Sandoval's first choice. So Mitt Romney, as far as we know, at the best case scenario, is Governor Sandoval's second choice. So,
could Sandoval help the Romney candidacy at all at this point, do you think?
No.
In Nevada?
He doesn't have a political machine. There's no organization surrounding him. And he's not so popular that if he were to take a child out of a burning building, okay, but he hasn't done that.
And how's that campaign appearance going to go? You know, Sandoval gets up there, everything's going great. You know, we're getting more businesses here. Things are really shaping up. And then Romney is like, "This economy is terrible.
Yeah, it's awkward.
This president is the worst president we've ever had. Things are going terrible in this country. We need a change." Yeah, there's
got to be tension between them, I would think, because Romney actually specifically says that Nevada's economy is bad. He talks about the unemployment rate, he talks about the foreclosures, and it's kind of an oblique reference to Governor Sandoval in a sense.
Well,
do you think?
I don't think he's thinking of it in those terms. I think he's trying to talk to Nevadans and say, you need to make a change here. And he probably does realize his message is totally at odds with Sandoval's message, but it's also, you know, at odds with some of the facts on the ground. So I think, you know, the tension between those two, I think, you know, you can't get around it. If they appeared together, you know, it would definitely be awkward. So I'm all for it.
President Obama will be here this weekend, and he's going to be here for 3 days of debate prep. I guess in 2008 he did a few days of debate prep in Florida, which was a state that he wanted to win. And by the way, Mana. You know about Mana?
He's cool.
You're giving me that blank look.
Yeah.
this is the largest.
Mitch, I'm not into the young people's music. I've told you many times. I don't know who that is. Is it a rapper?
Okay, we'll talk about the Stones later, Steve.
Okay.
This is the largest Latino pop rock band probably in the world. They've won several Grammys.
See, I knew it was music.
They are huge. Is this
They
correct?
are huge, and we're actually working on this right now. And you know, obviously, it's a direct attempt towards the Hispanic vote here in Southern Nevada. And the question is, there are a lot of people that are going to this event that could care less about President Obama. They want to see Mana. I mean, they're that big.
I mean, they pack out stadiums with tens of thousands of people, right?
They do. It's like they go on tour. It's like Springsteen.
So he comes here. Do voters in Nevada really care that he's doing debate prep in Henderson?
I don't think so, but I think his staff is probably pretty happy. In fact, I'd wager that when they did a show of hands for locations in which they'd like to be sequestered for 3 or 4 days to prep for the debate, that many of the staffers voted in favor of Las Vegas.
So Dubuque, Las Vegas, you know, was kind of an easy pick then?
I think so.
Oh, all right. Let's move on to the next topic, and that has to do with Senator Horsford running against Danny Tarkanian. Chuck Muth, who some of us know, he's kind of a firebrand, a conservative blogger. He wrote some of what Senator Horsford is terming racially tinged comments. He actually mentioned, quote, 2 black kids, end quote, in his blog playing basketball in Senator Horsford's television ads, when in fact these were Senator Horsford's children in his television ads. And so Senator Horsford got upset with this, and he claims that the campaign is going down this road. Now, I'm assuming that the Tarkanian campaign has distanced themselves from these particular comments, but to what degree have they?
Well, it started with the Tarkanian campaign, frankly, when they said, look, we're going to have some residents in the African-American community because of the basketball clinic that Jerry Tarkanian put on for so many years. And I think the Tarkanian campaign was anything odd about that, but there were people who took offense, who said that's racial stereotyping. And so Chuck Muth was saying, well, it's ironic that they've been criticized for racial stereotyping when look what you have here in this ad. So, you know, anytime you get into this, it's going to be very dangerous. Chuck Muth is not one to back off. In fact, he has kind of ramped it up.
He's doubled down, hasn't he?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And he'll continue to double down, triple down, quadruple down. He's not going to stop doing this. He's challenged, you know, Horsford to debate him about this point. I don't think you should hold your breath for that contest. I don't know, Mitch. Maybe you could get them to debate. You know, you got those two
we do have
Senate candidates together, so there you go. No, I mean Muth and Horsford.
Yeah. Muth and Horsford.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see. But it's you know, I think it might be overplayed a little bit on both sides there.
What are the dynamics in this race? The poll showed that Danny Tarkanian really didn't have a commanding lead over Stephen Horsford, but led him in some key demographic groups, and that surprised some people. But I'm hearing from the Horsford campaign that they think there's momentum on their side, and they're very optimistic about it. Is that what you're hearing?
There are so many different claims about internal polls on both sides versus the public polling that's occurred, and there's been such a large disparity, I think, in many of the polls in Nevada in general that you know, I tend not to believe nearly any numbers, and the smaller the district, the smaller the populace you're talking about, the less I believe the polls. I think it's been clear from the beginning that having the last name Tarkanian was a big advantage. It's also been clear that Stephen Horsford's campaign was going to do everything he could to drive Tarkanian's negatives up. You know, through mentioning this bank judgment and this, you know, land deal that went bad in California. There's been some snark from Horsford's campaign and others about how Danny Tarkanian seems to have no trouble raising money for his campaign and for campaign ads, but he can't pay this judgment that's standing. As far as the race issues, I think it's kind of a shame that things have devolved into that. I don't think Tarkanian meant any harm, however odd his comments may have been in the beginning, and I sort of think it's much ado about nothing. I hope this passes quickly and that we might actually get to some issues, and I'm interested to see the debates between these two candidates on some issues, I hope.
Okay, we just have a few minutes left, and I just saved this for you, Steve, because I knew you'd have some rich comments about it. That's on the monorail. They said because they're emerging from bankruptcy reorganization, they're still looking at an extension to McCarran Airport. They're looking at all sorts of expansion possibilities. They're looking perhaps to when the link that's
that project with the Ferris wheel, right?
Well, you may call it a Ferris wheel, but Caesars Entertainment doesn't like to call it a Ferris wheel. That will help the monorail, and then when Sahara gets perhaps occupied, that will help the monorail. Are you optimistic?
Well, here's the thing. Let's be honest about the numbers here. The monorail started with a debt of, as reported by the RJ, $757 million. They expunged all but $13 million of that in the bankruptcy proceedings. That's the nice legal way to say it. The real way to say it is they stiffed their investors to the tune of about 98.2% of all the money that was invested in this thing. So now they're saying any expansion is going to need to rely on federal transportation funds. Well, no kidding. Because what private investor in his right mind is going to loan him any money? I mean, what casino is going to want to, you know, invest in this thing? Of course, they're not going to get any private funds. My favorite, of course, was Bruce Woodbury's quote, where he said, "The monorail is far from perfect, but it has been successful from every point of view except for one." Yes, yes, indeed. Now, when you have terrible facts on your side, you're forced to say ridiculous things like that. And Bruce Woodbury, of course, very respected person. I'm sad to see he's put in that position where he has to defend the monorail on that basis. But I'm really not optimistic about extending it different places because at least Senator Horsford, for example, said in an interview with the RJ editorial board today that he was not in favor of giving federal grant money to this project when we have a $16 trillion debt. I mean, it's just there's just not money around to do these kind of things. And how useful would it be anyway, even if you did extend it to the monorail? Let's say that you extended it to the monorail and had a system you can get people's bags in there so they wouldn't have to, right, to the airport, so you wouldn't have to get people carrying their luggage on the trains, which there's no room for that. You check the bags right through. It still drops you off at the back door. It still drops you off at the back door. So this is not something that people, I think, find useful, except in one instance, and that is when there's a big convention like CES or Magic or the world of concrete, you know, something like that. Perhaps this rock band that I've never heard of. You can use the monorail to get around and avoid the traffic congestion and the parking. That's really the only advantage that it has right now, and I think that's probably the only advantage it'll have going forward.
Well, the traffic congestion has been relieved a bit.
Or so they claim. They say it. In fact, they say it's environmentally friendly. To which I say that is so awesome, because it's a good thing that the monorail is not being run by electricity generated by, say, coal-fired power plants, because that would, oh wait, it is. Oh well.
All right, we've got to leave it there. That is all the time we've got left on this edition of Nevada Week in Review. I'd like to thank Steve Sebelius with the Review-Journal, Kevin Bolinger with Fox 5, Patrick Cooligan with the Las Vegas Sun, and Elizabeth Crum with News 3. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.